we want to do everything possible to make sure you learn this and you learn this well. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask a couple of questions on the chat. If you don't know the answer, feel free to give your response, and you will also be corrected if there is any mistake. We have to make it fast because, as you can see, we have a couple of things we need to go through. We need to do a quick revision from our last class. We need to understand NPM. We need to try to understand how NPM works. We need to also learn about a couple of libraries that you definitely use most times. Then we'll move over to answering some other questions regarding NPM specifically. Then we'll also install some libraries and write some code on VS Code or repo.it. Is it repo? Okay, yeah, I think it's repo.it. Yes, repo.it. And finally, that should be the end of the session. Everyone should go to bed. Yes, so let me start by dropping a few questions, very simple questions. Just let me know once you can see a question. Let me start by dropping a few questions, very simple questions. Just let me know once you can see. All right, so I just dropped the first one. This is a simple question, right? Why do we use Node.js for backend development? So let's make this, highly interactive. I want to know your thought process as well, and I will also give you a couple of mental model to drive your progress better in backend development. Okay, so I can see Tolu is responding to that already. Too bad. All right, so I just dropped the first one. Okay, so I can see your response. Shitu, you said it's a form of simpler method to use your writing code and debugging. Well, that is also valid. It's a framework, JavaScript, okay. Okay, awesome. Tolu, well done. Nice answer. All right, so if you're just joining, we have a question there. Go ahead and drop your answer with regards to that specific question. Shitu, you said it's a form of simpler method to use your writing code and debugging. Well, that is also valid. It's a framework, JavaScript, okay. There, go ahead and drop. Okay, so read that from Mendy. So language, okay, front end and back end, which makes it more effective. Okay, so nice response as well. All right, so I'll go ahead and I think we have one other answer from Damilola. Functionality of the website, so backend development because of its object oriented. Okay, so nice one. I think someone else is also saying something. Latif. Okay, so while you're dropping that, I think I would also go ahead and just break it down very well. I would say one of the major reasons why we use Node.js for backend development is not because it's the best, neither it's because it's the easiest solution, right? Node.js is very good, like extremely good, of course, and I think one of the major reasons is because it's non-blocking, right? So I think I've explained that in the last class as well. So when we say something is non-blocking, unlike the default paradigm used by Python, it actually waits for something to complete before calling the next one. When it comes to Node, it doesn't wait for any process; it just continues to run, except you decide to await some processes yourself. That's a very good design implementation when it comes to having a backend engine. Also, it is very fast. Node.js is actually fast because it's kind of like coupled with of course C++ integration when it comes to accessing the file system, the process memories and all that. So that makes it really fast. Also, I think it offers this kind of I think I said that already. Everything is basically asynchronous, and it's also very good for concurrency. So when we say something is concurrent, it means that you can run multiple processes or multiple threads. You can have multiple things running at the same time, and this is actually a very big problem, especially when it comes to the Java community. Concurrent programming, you have to do a lot of integration, a lot of using a couple of libraries, and also you might not even achieve something very efficient because you have to be very good at it before you do something that works well. Else you might have mistakes in your code base. But when it comes to Node concurrency, I would say it's quite easier to get started with and to understand. Also, I think it's a good choice because using JavaScript for the web, for your interface, or even for your mobile, maybe like React JS, React Native, or maybe you're using Cordova. It's actually easier to it's actually easier to explain some of the things you're working on with the front end team or even your mobile team. Yeah, so I think that is one of the best feedback I can give for that question. So let me see what is the other response we have here. It's a tool for backend, majorly for server-side programming. It's used for server-side, but also you use it for front-end development as well. A lot of front-end development actually. But I mean, Node itself is actually used to run, the backend. But while developing your front end, you definitely use your Node coupled with npm to develop your Vue, React, JS, or Angular applications. And there are many other frameworks, of course. And the thing about Node is, there are lots of frameworks as well that can make your your development easier. We'll talk about that later on. Express, Happy.js, Sales.js, and the rest of them. We would have conversations on these things. Okay, so I'm going to drop another question. I really love the response from the audience. It shows, you know these things. You're actually following up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how Node.js works. So just tell me what you think. Drop your response, and I will also guide you through if you make mistakes. But as for the first response, you guys, I love your answer. So I think, Mandy, you also said it's used to build scalable microservices and serverless applications. Well, you can use any You can use a lot of tools for that, and you're correct. I mean, it's valid. But so when you see questions like this, I think we're actually talking about like the major, should I say the major reasons, the obvious reasons. But of course, when you say scalable microservices and serverless application, I presume you're actually talking about the simplicity when it comes to deploying such systems. Because of course, JavaScript is not so difficult to get started with. All right, so we have another question. How does Node.js actually work? And here I'm actually referring to, the idea around event loops, which I believe I explained. So I want to see if you remember what we discussed about, the concept of event loops. So tell me if you have an answer. I'm just going to give just 2 minutes. If you have an answer, quickly drop your response. And if you don't, then I would go ahead and explain how Node works from the concept of queuing and also pulling, right? So we call it pulling. We call it we have a queuing and also have like the operation performed in the processor where you have like this kind of event loop on JavaScript, right? On Node, you have like an event loop accepting requests, of course, from the queue and performing these requests one after the other. Understanding very well that this is non-blocking, right? So you need to really understand this. And I think I can see, yeah. So I have a description from here. I'm going to drop a picture. All right, so this is just an hint, right? You can explain from this. You can pick up your ideas from this. This is, the answer already, but just to make sure we are all following this session. So we did pretty much in the last class, and I actually think some of the beneficiaries, some of the students, they found it a little bit overwhelming, right? So we're going to cover some of those things again in this class. Okay, so I think I'm going to. It's almost 2 minutes. We have a couple of seconds left. No response yet. Did pretty much in the last class, and I actually think some of the beneficiaries, some of the students. Okay, that's a valid answer as well. Node.js works in an asynchronous pattern or manner. Read, execute, print loop. Okay, so we're referring to the repo, I guess, and that is good. Okay, so Node.js is event driven. That uses the event loop to schedule tasks from events queues into the core stack. Awesome. All right, so that is a very good answer, and let me explain. So if you look at the diagram we have the picture we have there, we have the request, and of course you're seeing people, so it means that the request is coming from a user, right? So maybe you write a very simple code base, just like what I have here on the, if you can see the browser, take a look at this. This is repo.it.com, and you can see I have a very simple code base, and I also installed a couple of I think a package here, UUID. What we have here is when you execute this program, basically what happens is this image that was shared with you on Discord. So you have your requests, enter what we call a queue, right? A queue is actually a kind of like data structure. I'm not going to go deep into that, but the ideology behind that is your requests are sent into kind of like a virtual container, and of course these items are meant to be executed just as they enter. So I don't want to start talking about FIFO and all that, but the idea is items enter a particular container, and they move into the event loop one after the other, and when they enter the event loop is meant to these items are meant to be processed before coming out from the IO. IO there refers to input and output. So input and output as the IO. So they are meant to be executed that way. But at the same time, you need to understand that it's non-blocking, which means if there's an item that is pending, it's going to be moved into, maybe you have like a blocked operation. You are going to have like another thread pool. So items are going to be pushed into that particular container, and other things keeps executing. So nothing is going to be waiting for another item to finish execution, except you decide to implement some kind of concurrency once again, or maybe asynchronous behavior. So I think basically that is it. I hope you understand. So the thing is, the client will probably send the request, of course, and there will be you do some fetching, some operations like querying for data, deleting data, probably updating data. So the event loop does the processing, which is of course non-blocking. And at the end of the day, you have your outputs presented to you. All right. So another question that we also have is this is a little bit technical, but try your best. Tell me what you think. So why is Node.js single-threaded, right? So when we say something is single-threaded, I also explained that in the last class. So tell me what you think. Why is Node.js single-threaded? We also have 2 minutes for that, please. So be fast. So I think first of all, what you need to understand is what we mean by something being single-threaded. The thread here describes the items that run your processes in your computer central processing unit, which is your processor, of course. So when you say an item is single-threaded or multi-threaded, there are different ways to execute programs or processes. So tell me what you think, and we just have a couple of I think we have about 1 minute. Okay, so I see only one person is typing, so I'm definitely going to explain that. All right, so not just single-threaded to provide better performance, and that is correct. So how does single threading give us better performance? So I think it basically has to do with the ideology behind the asynchronous processing. So when you have a single thread, of course, it means trying to perform any kind of a concurrent process. It means you have to really optimize, or maybe JavaScript or Node itself. Node itself has to really optimize that process to run along with other processes of the same thread. Thereby, this will definitely increase the performance and of course the scalability. And yeah, you can achieve this. So Node.js gives you better performance instead of trying to do your instead of having like multiple threads running on the same process. So you see a lot of companies they decide to use Node.js most especially for deploying what maybe described as microservices, and the reason for that is because of course it's lightweight and at the end of the day, it depends on what you're running, of course. But compared to some other languages, so you have to do a couple of installation. I think yeah, you have to do a couple, especially if you're doing something like Java, which I think was more like the standard for some time. So Node.js is actually lightweight, and of course, efficiency and performance is actually very very awesome when you're building with the Node engine. Okay, so I think from this question, we still have another question. We're going to deal with about 10 different questions, so we have to be faster. So we said Node.js is single-threaded, and the right question is if Node.js is single-threaded, then how does it handle concurrency? So I already gave a response to this. I already answered this. So if you really listened and paid attention, then definitely you should be able to answer this question really fast. Yeah, so as I said, you can go ahead and drop your answers. You don't need to be correct. The major thing is that you understand what we're talking about. If you don't, I mean, just just participate, right? Participate on answering some of these questions. Okay, yeah, so that's correct. It's a non-blocking ability. And yes, so that's why I said that answer was already from our previous explanation. The idea of non-blocking means you can have multiple tasks running concurrently, right? So that's very simple. That's very straightforward. Try to understand some of these questions, and trust me, a lot of questions I'm asking right now are actually coming from valid interview questions, like entry level interview questions. If you want to get a job as a Node.js developer, as a JavaScript, Node.js backend developer. So these are very valid questions. I have over like 200 questions that you can go through and try to understand Node better. We're going to pick 10 for today, so we have reached the fifth one, and let's talk about what we call callbacks. All right, so I have a question there. What uh, what are callbacks in Node.js, and how do they work? How do they work? Okay, so Mandy said callbacks are function. Okay, so I see others are not, Adewale, Virtual, Ife Sinachi, Latif. I mean, go ahead and participate. So callback are functions, and they are arguments. Okay, so I think just corrected that they are arguments of another function. Okay, so that's also that's not a bad answer, but let's put it this way. So ideally, you have maybe a function. You have a function performing a specific, operation. Probably sending data to your database, right? Sending data from that specific function to your database. And the thing is, remember that we said Node.js is non-blocking, which means the moment you start sending data, Node.js moves down to the next operation, right? It moves down to perform the next operation without even waiting to see if that was successful or not. So having a callback is basically saying, when this particular operation is completed, which is like saving to the DB. Once it's completed, I want to get a response. I want something to trigger the response, and that is basically what a callback is, right? So something is going to give me some response. You see, of course, it doesn't about that function doesn't come out itself. The response you get sometimes there is like response error. Yeah, definitely we talk about callback. Yeah, we did talk about callback when we did even using the then option, making asynchronous calls, right? So that is the modern pattern. The thing is, when you say something is asynchronous, at the end of the day, it's actually going to rely on these callbacks. There are various patterns of implementing callbacks, but the most recent pattern is using the asynchronous calls and await calls, which is async await. I think we started with the main functional callback pattern. After a while, we also add what we call promises, right? Yeah, implementing JavaScript promises. I mean, they are all promise-based patterns, but at the end of the day, you need to always try to improve as the ecosystem system, improves as well. So I think the most recent, the most modern pattern is async await, which we are definitely going to use while building some applications. Okay. Yeah, so as I said, they're mostly probably systems, but there are some kind of like obvious differences between implementing promises and callbacks. I would say the major difference is the structure. The structure, I mean, that's one of the obvious differences. Talking about structure and also the fact that when you're using promises, like direct implementation of promises, you have like this kind of built-in error handling pattern. For example, an async await code. It's easier to observe an async await code and understand what is really happening. Than implementing a callback. Probably I should show you a callback function. So I'll show you callback, like what it looks like. So I think I can do that. Let's see. Okay, so I'm taking this example straight up from the Node.js website. I'm sure you can see my browser, right? So I'm going to just take this off. If you can't see my browser, please drop a comment and let's try to follow that up. So right now we have like a very simple code base, and the idea here is this process data. This is a function, and it's meant to perform some kind of processing. And you have another function. Probably you're going to fetch the data from here, and we're going to assume that this function. So let's say we have function fetch data, and this function is meant to. This function is meant to call some sort of URL, so some sort of URL. So let's say. So it's going to get like a response from google.com. You then implemented like a way to make requests, which definitely I'm going to show you. Or you can also just go ahead and check from npm. Right, we have several patterns. We have using the fetch API, or probably the most used for now. I think it's Axios. So using Axios, for example, we can just make a simple request. And of course, you'll definitely find examples you can install and install it directly by just running npm install Axios. If you are using repo, it.com, you can just go to packages and search for Axios. So it's going to search for. So this is Axios, right? So you click on the plus, and you have Axios being installed. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do here is, of course, just pick up this code. So this is like an Axios request, an example straight from documentation. So we can just require this at the top here, right, at the top level, and we're making a simple request now. So we're making a simple request to, let's say, a URL, right, which is this URL. So when we call this, whatever we pass in, we're going to make that request, to this, and at the end of the day, we're already doing a couple of .10 and all this promise-based patterns here. But I'm going to take that off for now. Of course, when you're working, you need it, but I'm just going to take it off because I'm trying to explain something to you. So let's assume we make a request, and at the end of the day, our response is be returned. So we can say let REQ equals this. As I said earlier, you still need the .10 and all that to make this function really effective or work. But of course, you can add your .10 to this parameter, to this function called here. We're not going to do that. That is going to be a little bit talking about something else instead of the exact explanation. So now we say var data equals fetch data, which means we're passing this as a value to data. The idea here is we're going to return ROEQ, for example. It means we're going to return so let's say results. That's a small. Yeah. So we're going to return the result, input data. So a quick assumption is, the result that was returned is like the data becomes equals 1, just an assumption, and that is the return, the value that was returned. Now we're going to add, 1 plus 1 here, and at the end of the day we have 2. So just an assumption here. What really happens is JavaScript is not going to wait for this to complete. Node.js is not going to wait for this to complete, and the reason is because you are making a request to some other APIs or some other server, and remember Node.js is not blocking, so definitely it's going to move on to the next stage. So the only thing you can do here is try to implement some sort of asynchronous async and wait implementation, so that Node.js would wait for this to complete. We're not doing that, but just to show you the difference between having a function like this that will definitely that will probably that I won't choose definitely. I would say that will probably not wait for fetch data. Instead of doing something like this using callbacks, you can go ahead and implement this. So as I said earlier, I took this example from the Node.js, the official Node.js website, which I'm going to also share with you in the room. You can check the room and you'll see, yes. All right. So by using this, what's going to happen here is, while you're fetching this data, you have your callback implemented in here, right? So, and you're definitely going to check from this option. It has this implementation of error and data, so you can easily grab the data once you're done using your callback function, of course. So this is kind of like the base of working with callbacks and how they work, right? But at the end of the day, you might prefer to use the async await pattern, as I said earlier, because it's actually more readable, which is of course a promise-based pattern. It's actually more readable, and of course from the website here, it says the coupling is low, and what that means is this is really like coupled together, right? But you can have this. This you must implement this like this way before you can have this callback, work. Though there are other ways to also implement callbacks, but at the end of the day, you must have your callback and all that. So, which means the callback and everything has to happen within this function. But remember what I said earlier, that if we are using the other pattern, which is this pattern, instead of implementing async await in here, we can even instead of implementing the await in here, we can also go ahead and implement our response in here. We can wait for this here rather than wait for it here. So it's no longer tightly coupled. You can do this on different levels in your code base, right? So that is the idea behind the promises and callbacks. This is very valid, right? So you can also go ahead and use the callbacks, or you can also use the promise-based pattern. So a very simple example right now, we're going to pick this up from Axios, and we're going to test. Yeah, we're going to test this back here. So let's see what we get. We'll make a simple request to HTTPS. Cool. I think we have a JSON placeholder, right? So just to test this, so you see the promises there and async await in action. You see we're using like the fetch API here. Of course, we already installed the actions, so we're going to use actions here. I'm just going to paste this in here. We're going to run, and let's see what we get. So you see, we actually got our response. This is like this is too much, anyways. Here's the whole response. Let's try to grab the data. So I'm going to say response data. Right? Okay. Let's run this. So you see, we have our data, and this data is gotten from JSON placeholder. So this is just like a website where you can play around with JSON. We've not got into this, but basically the communication between like your front end and back end, or maybe your mobile applications and your back end, there's something we call like communication. Should I say standards? or patterns where you use that JSON or XML or maybe some other implementation such as GraphQL and the rest of them. But this is simply showing you the promise-based pattern using async await. And what we did here is we made this call. Ideally, we won't be able to get the response if we don't do then, and here we're catching for errors, basically because Node.js, of course, non-blocking, right? It's going to pass this, and that is the end. It's going to go on to the next thing, right? So this is basically how to grab data or wait for some wait for this to execute completely. So I think that is it. Okay, so let's proceed. We are currently on the sixth question, I guess. So let's talk about. So I think that was the seventh question. So let's try to understand what we mean by I/O. So we have another question. How would you define the term I/O? So let's assume you go for an interview, or maybe you're discussing with someone, and they're already trying to ask you what is I/O. So I think Mendy is the only one typing, and that leads me to say that most of you probably don't understand some of these things. So I'm going to ask a quick question right now. Please, on the scale of 1 to 5, I want you to drop your response, everybody. Tell me if you're following through with the explanations I'm giving in the class from the scale of 1 to 5. How do you understand what we're doing, Node.js, from the scale of 1 to 5? Please drop your response. I want everybody to drop their response so I'll know how to follow up with the rest of you. Okay, 3. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So if I say something that you don't understand, ask a question. From a scale of 1 to 5, please go ahead and drop your response and be fast about that. Okay, so while you're doing that, 3. Okay, while you're doing that, we said how would you define the term I/O? Tolu 2. Okay. Tolu, you can also go ahead to drop your question. If you have a question or something to go ahead and drop your responses. Let's assist you right now on the call. Okay, so I/O basically means input-output operations, and when referring to input-output operations on Node or in Node, we're basically talking about how you bring in data and how you send out data, right? How you bring in data and how you send out data. Okay, so Latif 2. Okay, so what I would advise you guys to do is always go back to the recordings that we have on YouTube, play them. Yes, and also you'll be receiving more resources. I think 3 is a fair number. 2 is also a fair number, but you just have to do more work from your end. You try to go through the links we drop, try to understand anything that we send down to this channel and you don't understand. Make sure you drop a question about it so we can fix it, on the go. Okay, so we got a response from the input-output operations. That is correct. And then, when we say input-output, we're actually referring to data coming in and data going out. Yes. So another question right now is let's see if you really understand the ideology behind working or doing backend operations, right? So we have front end, we have backend. So tell me, you guys are of course doing backend. So I want you to tell me the core difference between what you do as backend developers and also what the front end guys do. So I think that will be the last question. Not for today, because we still have another question section. So once we're done discussing the NPM and some other things, we will have another set of questions coming in. All right, so tell me, backend and frontend, what do you think? Please be part of this session. Samuel, go ahead and also drop your response, right? Perpetual. All right, so front-end is the UI and backend deals with object-oriented. Okay, so you can actually have object-oriented code as well on the on the front end, right? So Latif, just to point out a few things there, a lot of programming, whether front end or back end or even mobile, you can definitely implement object-oriented patterns. So don't really get that wrong. On the back end, we can say the back end actually manages like the functionality, which is what Adida just said, or maybe like the core business logic of the application. So in terms of like the things that you want to perform that are more business centric or probably more does not really have much to do with presentation, and it's more of the business angle trying to solve the real problem. I think operations are performed on the back end. But sometimes you might be using applications as maybe as an engineer, and you might not necessarily require backend sometimes. Because maybe you already have like an API, like a third-party API you're connecting to someone else's API. Sometimes you can also be building a backend applications that do not require like a front end, like a UI, right? But at the end of the day, front end generally can actually refer to your mobile or the web, or even whatever you're building to display a result to a user, right? Which means I've seen developers refer to even the command line as front end because that's what they interact with, right? They interact with like CMD or maybe their terminal and they get response. So that is looking more like a front end to them based on what they are doing. So backend deals with the server, application logic, and database, correct? Front end builds the user interactive. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so nice one, Benny. Damilola, front end deals with the appearance, which is the looks of the website or applications, while back end deals with interaction. I won't go with interaction or that's the functionality. But I won't. Yeah, I would rather just stop at functionality. So Damilola, the front end deals with the appearance and which is the looks, that's correct, and the back end deals with the functionality, which is the core logic, right, and also the database connectivity and all that. So Adewale, front end is the UI, while back end deals with server and data interaction. So I will take off that FE. Yeah, that's correct. Without the FE, right? You said backend deals front end, so take off the front end there. Front end deals with the client side UI, while backend includes the functionality and the business logic of the application. Backend also builds money. Okay, yeah. So awesome. You guys really have like great feedback on that. Okay, so let's proceed. Looking at our workflow here. So what we're going to do right now is like a quick revision of our last class. I won't be opening the terminal much in some of our classes, at least for now. I think it's kind of like confusing some of us. But basically, what I do with the terminal is just installation and probably testing, showing you a couple of things on the repo, which is the node repo, right? Where we just type in node and we can execute quick commands, but let's not do that. That is looking very technical. So rather, I'm going to show you. We are back on the Node.js website. Basically, what to do is you install this, which is the long-term support version. And as you can see, it's also recommended for most users. Once you have this installed, of course, you can now go down to the docs, the documentation, which you're definitely going to be working with. So if you're not on this documentation, go ahead and open it right now on your laptop. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. So 30 seconds and we'll proceed. All right, so I believe you have documentation open now on your end, but if maybe you're finding it difficult to do that, let me drop the link on the chat. Okay, so now you have the documentation opened. What you're seeing here, I mean, it looks a lot, of course. Assertion, basically, for testing, trying to compare values and all that. You have a couple of, C++ integration that we're definitely not going to talk about, and you might definitely not need to know at this stage. We also have like, models and packages. I'm just going to be giving like quick overview. on some of the items here. I'm not going to open any of them. Rather, we are going to do some things from NPM, which is the package manager, and we'll get there. Okay, so yeah, talking about modules and packages, we have like a bunch of default packages that come pre-built into Node, such as OF and parts, FS, which is a file system. We also discussed that in the last session where I showed you how to read and write from a file. Of course, we only tried one pattern. They're actually there are always like two major ways to use some of these libraries. Can be synchronous or asynchronous, right? So yeah, so that is for the modules. Of course, you can have external modules where you download modules or packages implemented by some guys in the community. Yeah, so for example, actions. Yeah, so we can just install that using npm I, which I stands for install. It's just a short form for saying install. So we can install actions and we can use actions just like what we did in our code base right here. Yeah, so also we have net for networking, OS for trying to assess some things about the OS, which this is to tell you by default that JavaScript have done like a couple of Node.js per se has done a couple of embedding and trying to communicate to your system. Of course, we have a lot of integration to lower level objects, maybe using C++ or something, and they could assess some of these low level details on your machine. And using the OS yesterday? Sorry, in the last class, we were able to assess a couple of things. Probably we'll just check that again. So we're able to assess a couple of things from your machine's architecture, your archetype, where you have to see like maybe you get 32 bits or 64 bits operating systems. We also check like our CPUs are free, so you can just call this, right? I said I was not going to open the terminal, and you can do this directly on your machine. You see your operating system version. The question is, okay, so when are you going to need something like this? So imagine you're building an application, building an application. I'm trying to think of an application that I've used back then on Windows that require checks for this item. Let's see, memory management app for Windows. Yeah, so you can definitely check out some of these tools. Of course, I believe most of them might be built with other technologies, but I believe there are some tools here that you can also try to replicate what they do. Like maybe they are going to show you the total memory, what is consuming your memory, the current folder containing that item consuming your memory. Like a lot of details, right? So you can also build something similar with Node. Though it might look a little bit more technical, but I mean the documentation is broad and you have a lot of plugins you can use as well. So you can try to replicate something like that, but for your browser this time, right? Kind of like combination of Node and also showing you on your browser, or maybe showing you on the terminal, right? So you check the free memory, you get your response on the terminal and all that. Yeah. So basically, you can come up with something like that, and you have like the OS package or module there to assist you, right? To do a lot of these things without having to think of using some other languages that are kind of like closer to the machine, like C and C++. So let's continue. We have parts, and using part library, of course, you can assess your parts. You can also try to resolve a specific part to see if that part is available or not. So what you have to do is click on this, right? While you're testing, you can just maybe try to click on this, and you'll see an example on how to use this, how to join different parts together. So we have lots of examples. So basically, from the documentation here, you can do a lot of things. Test these things on your machine. Just make sure you understand what you are testing in the first place. So when you open the documentation, try to read and understand what this library does. We have part module provides utility for working with file and directory paths, and it can be accessed using this. So basically all you have to do is bring in this guy here, and then you start calling the several methods you have in here. Also, I think let's see, we are currently running this on REPL IT. So let's see if we can have, yeah, I think we should be able to do this. Yeah, so that works. So as you can see, we just ran this. We're able to get some of these, some of the methods. We're able to see some of the like details of this. I think I'm supposed to save this. Okay, yeah, I did. Okay, so we're able to see some of the details of this particular part library. Another way to do this is to probably put this in a table. Oh, okay. Uh-huh. So okay, so this looks very scattered anyway. So let me take that off. Yeah, but you can definitely use the console.dir method to see like the libraries, like the methods you have, and that is just like a trick that you can always try to apply when trying to use something new, right? So maybe I do UUID, which is what I installed. UUID is basically for generating strings or generating a unique strings. So I would call him ID, and by executing this, let's see what happens. So by executing this, you see I have like V1, V2, V. So these are basically getters, right? And we can execute this just to see what they do. So we can say UID.v4, which is basically a method, right? Getter method. So we can just run this, and you see we have our value here. So this is like a new unique value, right? So this is what I mean. You can definitely check it out from your end as well. Okay, so let's proceed. So that is for the part. Yeah, and there are some other like we have for the process module, which of course you can use to manage processes, right? So you can use it to start and manage processes, and also get like process arguments. So I think this means create. I don't know. CWD. The only thing I can think of right now is create working directory. But that does not make sense. So let's check. CWD. No. Process. Oh, okay, so I think interface. Okay, to get current working directory. Oh wow. Okay. So C kind of like looks like create, but it's used to get working directory. Returns the current working directory. Okay, that's great. Yeah, so this returns the current working directory. Okay. Yeah, so this returns the current working directory if you import CWD. And as you can see what is going on here, let me also explain that. Yeah, let's just paste it here. So you see that using the braces, we can actually bring in like some specific methods, right, inside this particular or objects inside this particular library. So we're going to try that for our UUID, which means I should be able to do V4, right? And let's see if this works. Let's see. Okay, so I think this is that the previous. I'm going to run this again. That's something new, right? Okay, yeah, so that works. So you see, we can actually get V4. This is basically this structure. If I got that right. Okay, so this is the structure. So I don't know. Maybe I can call that object destructuring. So the idea is you're trying to grab items within a specific package. Yeah, I think we're still saying same thing. Yeah, well, I definitely believe it's destructuring. It's called destructuring. Trying to get, so we can also call V1, right? So you can have V1 and V4. And you see, we have two versions. So we have version 1 UUID. I hope you understand what I'm doing, but this is basically trying to trying to display this. So we have V1 and V4. Okay, so we have version 1 of the UID implementation, and also version 4. We're able to destructure the specific item and grab the specific methods from the package. So if you don't understand what I'm doing here, feel free to drop your questions right straight away on the chat. But this is simply this is not so complex, right? So instead of calling like UUID, then you have to do UUID.v1 or UUID.v4, right? So you can just, if you know a specific thing you want to use, it's better to import it directly than to import the entire UID. And why is that better? It's better because when you know like this, it's actually going to be sitting in memory whether you use it or not. Also, calling this is only going to bring in v4, right? And v4 is just I'll call this a method or like an object, but calling the UID is going to give you like a whole bunch of v4, v1, v2, v3 if you have all those versions as well. So that's one thing you need to know when you are doing importation, right? When you are bringing in items, if you have like a whole bunch of items, and at the end of the day, all you're using is one specific method, I think you can just go ahead and import this into your code instead of the full package. Okay, so that is it for process. You can read through and test most of those methods. Yeah, so I think we still have. So these are basically some of the items you will be using that come with Node, right? Some of these other items can be a little bit, should I say, they can be a little bit complex, right? You definitely make use of timers as well, but I think most of the time prefer to work with a bunch of libraries for doing that. So just take your time, go through this. We use crypto a lot when it comes to cryptography. So crypto here is not depicting the coin, but rather it's all about cryptography, how to encrypt. We see we have like a whole bunch of methods, right? How to encrypt and decrypt. We're not going to talk about this right now, but definitely we're going to use this. This is kind of like an advanced knowledge, sort of, and bringing you into this space right now might not be the best thing to do at this level. So we're definitely going to talk about the crypto. We're going to use this for doing encryption. Maybe you type in a password and you're trying to save that password to your DB. You have to encrypt that password so that anyone that is able to hack into your DB at the end of the day, which of course will not happen because you will learn some advanced pattern for security, right? And also security is not so, it's something you have to always improve on. But if anybody hacks into your DB, they would have to just see your password, sitting right inside your DB. You have to hash some of those details before saving them into your database. So we're definitely going to use crypto. I'm going to close this documentation now. What I would advise you do is go ahead and bookmark this. Right? You see some of the major links I use or the major websites I use are bookmarked. So go ahead and bookmark this at this page so that you can easily access it all the time. After a while, you can remove it from your bookmark when you feel you are comfortable enough with writing Node.js code. So let's close this and let's talk about NPM once again. So from NPM or in NPM, you basically get a lot of packages, right, deployed by so many people. So imagine we're trying to get a package that we can use to generate random strings. Maybe imagine we're building like something like bit.ly, for example. So I use most of bit.ly, which is basically a URL shortener. I don't know. Tell me if I made a mistake here, but yeah, spelling sometimes it's a programmer. Okay, so tell me, so URL shortener. So imagine we're trying to implement something to shorten URLs. I would always advise you to implement the steps, right? So you at least know your steps, and that would make programming a lot easier for you. So let's assume that what we need to do here is first accept data from front end. right? That is step 1. So accept data from front end. I would rather do this with diagrams. So let's say step 2, and what we're going to do on step 2 is probably verify link. So maybe we have some sort of patterns for verifying the link that the person is putting in there. So we can say verify link validity or validate link. Again, yeah, that's too much grammar. Okay, so you validate the link. So just to make sure it's a valid link, maybe check if it has a HTTPS or HTTP, all that kind of stuff. So after validating the link, I think maybe the next thing you might want to do is generate random string. The random string can be maybe 7 characters. So after generating this random string, I think what you want to do first is to check if generated string already exists in database. So because at the end of the day, you're going to buy like a short URL, maybe something like go.ly, just an assumption, and you want to always append maybe the generated 7 characters to this point. Maybe you have something like ABC hyphen go ly1. So just an example, how many characters we have here? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, this is already too much. Okay, so let's assume this is our newly generated link. So we're going to save this for the DB, and we want to first check to make sure that this is not already being used. And if you check and it's already existing on DB, you just have to generate something new. The best way to get unique values is to use this, but of course, you have a link and you're trying to generate something unique, you definitely don't want to send this to someone. I mean, this is even more difficult to deal with than having like let's say we have HTTPS universe which I actually feel is long. Let's assume we have this, right? And you want to shorten this because it's long. You definitely don't want to use this, right? So you need something as short as this, but at the same time, you need to verify that this is not. So you can also add that as a step, right? So check if generated string already does not exist. Does not exist in DB. You can just see if it exists. Okay, so I think we can have that as a different step, which is like step 5. So this is step 3, step 4, step 5. So we can say if it exists. So you see what we're doing right now is like a pseudo code, right? We're not really building yet, but we're just making sure that we get our steps right. So that by the time we start coding, we know what we've done and what we've not done. If not, sometimes programming can building stuff like this can actually overwhelm you, and you might be lost in the process. So step 5 if it exists, generate new link, right? And verify again. So at the end of the day, when you finally realize that okay, this does not exist, what happened? You save the generated link with the main or the original link on the DB. So you're saving the generated link with the original DB on your DB, with the original link on your DB, and this is just like I'm just trying to like design this, but of course we can make the process better if we're trying to really engineer this. So, but this is more like a very simple way to look at this problem and solve this problem. So we said we're going to save the generated link to the original link. Why do we need to save the generated link to the original link? Why don't you try to do some sort of like encryption where you encrypt the long text to give you something smaller? Yeah, I mean, if you are a master of encryption, maybe that's something you can do. I'm not certain, but I believe this is kind of like the best approach. So what happens here is when the front end visits this link, if it's bit.ly, you can follow the same pattern. When you visit this link, what your backend would have to do is to collect this part, right? Extract this part. So we're not implementing that part. I'm just trying to show you. Your backend will extract this part and probably call it ID, right? And then go into your DB to query this ID. And if it finds this ID, right? If it finds this ID, then it's going to grab the original link and then it's going to redirect you there. So if found, redirect. So if you say if you found the ID, redirect us to original, right? So let's assume we have like get original. So for example, say if the ID was found, then get original. I can't spell original link. So we're going to like get the original link. So this is more like a function. We're going to get the original link. So we have like results, right? So we have to redirect us to this particular site right now. So that's what will happen. It will redirect us to the original site. So this is just like a pseudocode, right? This is just like a very simple implementation. And the moment you think about systems this way, what we've defined here is the process of at least saving the data, right? Then you have to define another process of communicating with data when there's another request to communicate with that data. So once you've defined the steps like this, it will be very easy to do what you need to do. So right now we're explaining NPM. How does NPM come into this right now? We need a way to generate these unique URLs. In the last class as well, I said we can definitely do that using our time. When you're using like the date time, you can actually get like unique values. Not so unique compared to working with UID, but of course, every single milliseconds, you can't get you can't get the same millisecond, right? Because a millisecond today, a specific time value today is different from what you have like tomorrow. As a matter of fact, it differs every second. But to avoid maybe having the same item being generated at the same time when on the back end, that might lead to errors. It's always good to use something even different and do some sort of verification. And of course, your date time will definitely not give you like a bunch of characters, right? So maybe you have another way to append. Maybe you get like the date time value, you append it to some characters. Not a problem, but I don't see that as something that's so efficient. Yeah. So what you can do instead is probably import. Let's try const random equals require. So there's a library called random string. I want us to first verify how we will use that. So let's see, random str. So looking at this right now, this is what I searched for, right? That's random str. And I think I searched for this probably because I think that is what we use. I think there's a library like this in Python, but in JavaScript, I think I would rather go for this. Looking at what we have here, right? Looking at the popularity, the quality, also the level of maintenance. This has no level of maintenance, and as you can see, the last time it was published 6 years ago. This is 7 years ago, so this is actually more maintained. So you might use this and it works for you, but the problem is when it's no longer being maintained. It's either you opting to maintain it yourself, or you are definitely going to have a long-term problem, probably coming back to this code to fix a bunch of errors. So let's go ahead and use this, which is the random string library. So you see, you can install this if your code base is offline. Right now we're using REPL-IT, so I'm just going to search for random string. So let's search for random string. All right, awesome. So now that we can see random string, you just have to click on plus, and this will be installed. And yeah, that was fast. So we have random string installed. We just have to call random string, and then the next thing we do is random dots. Let's take a look at what we have in there first. So of course, remember you have a documentation that you can follow. Always remember that. So because I said you should use console.dir does not mean you would want to do that all the time, right? So we have a documentation here, and maybe when you don't have a documentation of time, you have to stop there. You can try to view the structure of that particular object, but I mean generally you have it here, so I don't see why you should be looking for it using console.dir. Though you can also check, just for fun. Okay, so we have a random string that generates 7. This is going to generate 7 characters for us. We have a random string that generates 12, and we want to have a lot of alphabetic. I think everything, we want everything to be alphabet. So you see, everything here are just alphabets, no numbers. Yes, and can also generate some random string from a specific character set. So you see a bunch of ways to actually have like random strings generated just using this library. This is a very wonderful library. So by default, I think it generates about 20-something characters. You can check it out. But let's go ahead and let's go ahead and generate. So let's say part. So let's assume our link has two parts, right? Part one and two. Not like Nigerian style, but like part A and part B. So let's say we have part A, for example. Remember to have a let keyword there. Let's say we're generating like an assumption for, right? And on the other side, we also want to generate for. Then at the end of the day, we're going to have maybe after you've done your verification, so let's just say both parts. And let's just bring this together using, so we have part B, part A. Of course, we're going to put this right. So we have this, joined together with our hyphen. Let's see what we have. Not prints, but of course, so the log those parts. Okay, let's take this off. All right, so let's test this and let's see what we have. So I'm running this right now, and yeah, so there's an error and it said random string is not defined. Okay, so random string, and let's see what we get stored. Random string. Okay. All right, so we call this random, not random string. Okay, so I hope you figured out the error here. This was not random string, but random. So also, I think this also means we can put this here and bring in generate directly, but I would prefer to proceed like this. So let's run this and make sure that our error has been fixed. So you can see what we have. Now we don't have single characters, rather we have 8. So this is more like 8 characters. So we can say this is what we have right now. At the end of the day, we can also even append our go.ly, right? Probably with our HTTPS, because we're sure that our server is definitely HTTPS. So let's go ahead and run this again. We're going to have a new set of characters there. So this is running, and this is what we have. So we're able to produce this as our results. So as you can see, we have a shortened link. We did not pass in any like URL, right? We did not pass in any specific URL. But of course, you can wrap this into a function and decide to. So we can wrap this into a function. I would say generate short URL. Right, we move this thing here. And when you're generating a short URL, you expect like the original URL. So we can just say console.log. Okay, so we can say the original URL here, which is original URL. We didn't do anything like saving the DB and all those stuff. We have not gotten there yet. So we're just going to display that the original URL was shortened. Okay, that doesn't matter. Was shortened to. Okay, so the original URL was shortened to this. So let's also verify if this works by calling generate short URL. I want to pass it like HTTPS universe topscale.org. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so we have an error which is saying generate short URL was not defined. So probably, generate here was wrong. Let's run it again. So you see, universe on topscale.org was shortened to this. So that is what our implementation looks like. This is quite straightforward. There's no complexity around here for now. It's just a simple function, doing a bunch of generating items. Of course, we didn't do things like verifying if this is already in the DB. Verification. So we see verification. We didn't do validation, right? If what comes in, which is this data, so maybe somebody just passed in like, this is not a valid link, right? So we didn't do validation. So you need to think of that. So I think we can call that input validation. You need to do input validation, URL verification at the end of the day, or maybe like a database checks. So there are other things we need to do, right? And not a big deal. We're definitely going to do these stuff in future classes as well. But this is just a very simple implementation, pure just using functions and this simple level, which is the random string. So that's really that building something like bit.l. Like though it has other functionalities, like definitely other functionalities, but this is more like a base point, right? First off, you need to be able to generate this. You need to have some functions for checking your DB and all that. So let's proceed. And that is it about npm. You install libraries, you use them, you have documentations you can follow. If there are no documentations, you can search on Google for a documentation of that specific library you're looking for, and definitely you would have some pointers that might take you to their GitHub repository, right? And probably they have like a README on the GitHub repo that would explain some of these things in details. Okay, so that's it for npm. So let's and also external node libraries, because what we just used here is also an external node library, right? So I believe you understand this. There are so many other node libraries. I have some that we have used. We have a lot of node libraries. I won't be able to explain or teach you every single one of them, but I'm going to paste some of them that we used in the past year. So just in case you see some people using these items, maybe like SendGrid, which is basically what you would install for sending emails using SendGrid. AWS SDK probably for using AWS. AWS cloud solution, right? You have Actions, which is what we've tried on this call as well, for sending requests. You have Bcrypt.js, which is also something used for encryption, just like crypto. But I say it uses the crypto library, but it makes encryption and decryption much easier if you don't understand the other crypto package. We have Chalk, which is basically used for printing things on terminal and beautifying it, making it look more pretty. Not a big deal, except you're building like a command line application. You have Cloudinary for saving things to the cloud. It's a cloud solution as well, but mainly for storing images and videos, right? Digital contents. You have Cause, which is basically used for managing your cross-origin request servers. Like when we start working on API related stuff, I will explain that in details. You have CSV for passing CSV. Which is something that looks like your main Excel document. You can pass this into your JavaScript functions and use this particular library to manage it. You have .env for managing ENV files, which we'll also understand shortly. Express, which is a framework for building APIs and also backend services. Handlebars, which is for templating. And when I mean templating, like HTML related templating stuff. We have Joy, which is for input validation. So this is basically what you might use. We have some others, but this is like my preference. I use Joy. We have JSON Web Tokens, which is for generating JWT tokens, which you would understand shortly as well. I'm just making a few pointers here. KNX for it's more like an adapter to your DB, right? You can use it it's more like an ORM, but I don't see it that way. We have other ORMs like Sequelize and some other options, but KNX is wonderful. Sequelize is good. We have others. We have Type ORM and the rest of them. So Mailgun is just like SendGrid for sending emails as well, and you can use this particular which is their default, their main library for their company. You can use this to send emails. Mongoose is for Mongo, which is kind of like a database related stuff that you will learn shortly as well. We have Morgan, which is basically for logging. We have Mortar, which is for uploading files, LoadMailer, and the rest of them. So as you can see, in this project, we definitely also use random string for generating. And we also use GUID. So these are things you will definitely do when you're working on large projects in the future. You're going to have like a whole bunch of dependencies, and you must also learn to manage dependencies and uninstall the ones you're not using for your project. All right, so that is it. If you don't use it.com, I would advise you, to try it once in a while. You don't necessarily need to have like a complete setup offline. You can definitely just try this on any machine, any computer. You just have to log in and uh, create a new project, select Node. As you can see, yeah, you can just start coding already. So I think we have also done something about OOP, which I'm going to also explain to you a little bit before we finalize this session. Let's let me see if you have a couple of questions for me. I'm not seeing any question yet, and I hope I'm not way ahead of myself already. I hope I hope you're following me. Yeah, I hope so. If you are not, please ensure you drop your questions, right? Okay, so that's it about those libraries. The next thing we should be looking at here is to answer a couple of questions again. I hope you're not tired already. So let's answer a couple of questions. So first off, based on what we've talked already on this call, what is NPM? And this time we're going to have lesser time to answer. So please try to be fast. You can start answering the questions already. What is NPM? All right, so that's a very good answer, no package manager. And yeah, so generally, a package manager is found in a lot of languages, and what you do using the package manager is to play around with packages, install packages, export packages, build packages, and all that. So that is the major function of every package manager. So in this case, for Node, it's specifically Node package manager. Apart from npm, we also have we can also use the option from Facebook, which I think is let's see that name. Yeah, so I believe someone from here can remind me, right? I don't use it a lot, but yeah, what's the name? Francis. Francis, you should be answering that question already. Okay, so from Facebook. Okay, so I'm going to ask the next question while someone drops the answer for that. So the question here is why is Node.js preferred over other backend technologies like Java and PHP? So I think the package manager I was trying to is Jan from Facebook. So you can also check it out. But we're using Node for most of our operations here. Sorry, I mean NPM. So can someone go ahead and answer this question? Why is Node.js? Okay. It's a synchronous behavior. That is good. It's flexibility and simplicity. Yeah, you're correct. You don't have to guess. That is valid. Yeah. Then also, I think you should also understand that Node is actually fast, right? Node is actually fast, and it can be compared to some of these languages. PHP definitely can be. Yeah, I wouldn't want to compare it to Java. I know Java is faster, but of course, it can be compared to some of these languages. It's fast, right? And yeah, with other frameworks that have come on board, like Happy has been there for a very long time. Happy HAPI also is also fast, especially when you are doing web-related stuff, and it's fast to develop applications using Go. I mean, imagine how we are able to build up something or IT pretty fast without a lot of stress trying to understand where how to connect these packages. So we have to install and we're using it already. So what is the major difference between you're using frameworks like Angular, Express, and Node? So someone should answer this question. What is the difference between Angular, Express, and Node? All right, so let's be fast. What's the difference between Angular, Express? So I like the fact that you are definitely participate. If you're not participating here, trust me, it's not a good idea, because your answers definitely might, I'm not saying will, but might give you points. So I would advise you answer. Okay, so no idea. Okay, all right. Okay, so back to the question, the difference, and I'll give you like yeah. So Node is the engine, right? So Angular is used in front end, while Express is Node. Okay, so Express is a Node is kind of like, yeah, it's a Node framework, which is basically used for backend. But Node itself is the engine. Express is a framework for that engine. Angular is also a framework for that engine, but the difference here is Angular is for front end, Express for backend, and Node is the main engine. Okay, so Angular, okay, Express, Node library, yeah, good. Nice answer. So I believe I think Wale, you understand. So yeah. All right. So what is the command used to import external libraries? What is or what are? Basically, I am teaching you one command, but we have others, right? So just tell me, based on what we've learned so far, what is the command used to import external libraries? Mm, So I think someone is right. It's actually require, right? Okay, so sorry, I think some others were typing and maybe I was too fast to respond. Yeah, but you can still go ahead and drop your answer. It's require. NPM install is to install, but not to import, right? So you can install a library without importing it. So NPM install is to install the library on your computer, or maybe in that particular environment, but require, yeah, right? Require is to bring in or import that item into your code base, and that is correct. Okay, so when you have like const lib, let's go back to our codes. When you have const random const this is not like, this is just your own naming, right? This is just like variable declaration. We can call this anything. I can call this Mav, right? I can call this John, and then we can use John. So, but of course, using John doesn't make sense, because now a new person coming here and they probably just seeing John is kind of confused. What do you mean by John dot generate? Is John a person? Is John an employee? Who is John, right? So it's always good to use something that makes sense. Yeah, that's what I would say. Something that makes sense. Okay, so let's something that makes sense and can define the context we're trying to talk about there. So yeah, so I think yeah, we've answered a couple of questions. Um, we've done this already, though that was supposed to be the last thing we do, but we've done this already. So I'm going to use the remaining time we have for now to say a few things about objects, right? Because this is something that a lot of companies would require you to know. Basically, OOP, or object-oriented programming, is uh, I'm not going to give you this kind of definitions that I'm going to explain, right? So, imagine the way you look at objects. Imagine the way you look at things around you. Probably when you're sitting, you have like a cup. You have like yeah. So let's work with a cup. Very simple object. You have a cup on the table, and you're trying to model a cup in your code. So how would you really model a cup? A cup is an object in real life. How would you model a cup in your code? We're just going to do something simple. So I'm going to say cup. Right? So how would we model this? First off, I think we should start thinking from the properties and the use case, right? What's the cup used for, and what are the properties of this cup? So, we can say it has handle, right? So this is kind of like a property. Has handle. Does it have like handle? So it's going to give us like a boolean. I'm sure you know what a boolean. I can call it a boolean. I call it boolean, right? So you should understand that this is going to give us like a true or false. Does it have an handle? Yes or no, which is like true or false. So of course, we can choose to go with yes or no, which of course is going to be a string. But to make it easier for you, you can use true or false. So that is your one property. Then we can have like the color. The color of the cup, is it black? Is it blue? Is it white? So that is another property we can also look at. So these are the properties we just defined, right? And maybe let's assume we want to go into more details. We're not looking at the height of the cup, but that is not necessary. Right? So these are properties, and your properties are meant to have values, of course, but not in here. This is more like a blueprint, which is a pattern that every cup should follow based on our definition, right? So this is where we define the cup, and this is the pattern all these cups should follow. Okay, so now what is the cup used for? So I think that is where the behaviors come in. But always remember to make sure you have the constructor. And so what is a constructor? A constructor is basically a way to make sure these properties are accepted into this our class right now, which is our object, right? So we can say now constructor we expect the has handle. We need to know if it has an handle. Then we also need to know color. So maybe you also have type, right? So when you have this kind of different types of cup spots for that. So we have has handle and code. We need to use our keyword to say has handle equals has handle. I'm going to explain what is happening here. This color equals color. So what is going on here? Now, basically, what the constructor is doing is trying to construct this object and make sure that we're not making any mistakes, right? So we're saying that is a constructor accepts these two values by default, which is any cup we create must have these two values. Now we are saying this has handle, which basically is referring to this, right? Even if it's not here, that's what it's referring to. So we're assigning has handle as a property to cup at this stage. We already defined it here. This is initialization. So this is declaration and this is initialization. So we said this dot has handle equals has handle. So this has handle we're referring to is this, right? So we're saying this dot has handle is equals to this, which is this particular has handle. So we can definitely change the name of this item, and then when we call this cup, we can use the new name assigned here. But the reason why you see people always doing this, like this dot name equals name, this dot color equals color, because they're just trying to keep this kind of clear definition, right? You won't tell a user, you won't say to a user, what I want from you is maybe what you want. You won't tell the user that what I want is probably is handle. And inside your blueprint, you have has handle. This is going to work, right? Definitely. But why? Why should you do that? So, that's why people always try to stick to the conventions here. So everything will look clean. So now we talk about function. So maybe like drink water. So I will say, this is very simple, right? We are drinking water with a cup, or we're drinking, I think water, not water, with a cup that has the color, right? So we're going to bring the color here that has this, the color. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying we're drinking a cup that has, the color passed in, append to color. So this is a very simple object. How I'm going to use this? Basically, what I'll do first is to export this. So that's where you see me use something like export. There are different ways to export. I love to export my classes this way. So we can actually have multiple classes in here that we're exporting, but now we're exporting the cup, right? And yes, so after exporting our cup, so we have the constructor, we have probably have a mistake somewhere. Class cup. Okay, yeah, we ended this wrongly, so this should have the backtick. So we're using the backtick for that. Okay, so we have this cup blueprint that we defined, and inside here, we're just going to create a new cup, right? So we're going to create a new cup. So now I'm using cup, it does not really sound realistic. We are definitely going to use a class for this, So, but let's just work with an example. So we can first import this. This is in a different file. We've exported it in that file. We need to import it here. I'm going to rename this to cup, right? Of course, you can have a different name to work. So we might say import cup from employee, right? That kind of thing. Or maybe we import the employee and the structure So this is what I mean. Just so you know that this is also valid. We can have an employee, and then in here we can do cause cop if was required. I mean, this definitely would work, right? You then have to call the cop, or you can actually call the cop directly. So let's just go ahead and to make this more reasonable, use this tool. And for models like this, for object models, I don't use capital case, but it's not something you compulsory. You can definitely think of it in the way. So let's just see what we have this. So let's just see what we have if we run this. We have any errors? Let's see. So we have class cop. So we're saying that we have that class. Of course, our code is here still running. Still generating the new links. And as a matter of fact, I noticed we made a mistake here. We said go.ly, and all of a sudden we appended this item without um, without passing the you should pass slash here, right? Okay, so now that we have said this is the class scope, what do we do? How do we create a new cop? How do we create a new cop? So yeah, I'm going to make this capital case. Then here I can say add scope, for example. So that scope is the new cop. And of course, does it have a handle? So I'm going to say true. And the color, we'll say green. So let's go ahead and that scope dot print print. So let's go back to cop and let's see. Drink water, right? Okay, so let's yeah, that was a creative function here. Okay, that's cop. Just going to call this log that. So let's see if we have any errors here. And yes, we do. So you can't define any cop without having new, right? So that was a mistake. Okay, so now we are drinking water with a cup that is green. That is green color. Okay, very bad syntax, very bad grammar. Okay, so I believe you understand that you get the idea, right? So you're able to pass in this kind of attributes, and now we say we're drinking water from the green cup because we're calling this from that cup, right? So this is basically OOP, the ability for you to model real world items see if they are real on your code, and it makes the structure of your code even better, even more readable, right? So this is more like a blueprint, right? And you're able to structure this item. So imagine if we're trying to do something similar for our URLs, right? So I'm going to say URL.js, and we're going to create a model that would work with. I'm going to call this example objects, right? So there are more to object-oriented programming in JavaScript. This is a very simple example. But now we're going to convert our URL into more like this kind of object pattern. So our URL should be able to generate URL. Let's go ahead and do that, right? So models.exports equals class, and we have URL. So I'm taking a new class URL. We have generate URL, which is going to be a function. What's now URL that we're expecting? We're expecting original URL, and basically that's what we're expecting here. So constructor, all right. Put the spelling is right. Constructor, okay. So original URL, okay. So we're going to say this dot original URL equals original URL. So when we generate a URL, we're going to say just for testing. So we're going to return this with the generated URL. So we're just going to test it before we move the code in here, right? So we're accepting the original URL, just like this one, create a new URL. And let's also assume that we can also put like the length of generated the length of random strings we're generating. We can have that in here as well, but we don't need that for now. So Just to work with the URL, let's make sure everything here is valid. Come down to index, and what we're going to do is call this URL example object as well. Const URL equals require URL, right? I will say let new URL equals new URL. I will pass my URL. Okay, so I'm just going to do new URL dot generate. Now, I hope you understand this. If you don't, if you're lost, just tell me on the chat and I'm going to explain this again. So let's just see if I have an error here. Of course, we do. Modules is not defined. Okay, so definitely made a mistake here. That should be module.exports, not modules.exports. Okay, so let's have a new URL to generate first. Generate short URL. Okay, so you see, this is just so it's good to have good naming so that it's be easy for you to point out these items, right? So you see, we are able to point out these items, and now yeah, so this is the generated URL, and of course we did pass in our code there. This works, right? This is good. Okay, so the next thing we should be thinking of right now is let's try to even model this better by removing this item, which is what we have right here. I'm going to move this item away from here. So let's take this off and let's move the entire function right into URL. So which is when they generate a new URL, we're going to generate a URL from here. Let's arrange our code very well. Okay, so I'm going to return this. Return this. Okay, good. This off. Okay, so this is what we return. Yeah, so the problem is where is random? Random is not on this file. You have to come back here to make sure. You have to make sure you put the random there. If not, it will definitely give you an error telling you that you can't find random, right? So let's come back to URL and let's put in random right here. So now this we should be able to generate our short URL. We're definitely going to get the original URL from here, which is this dot original URL, which we're pointing to it here, right? So this is the original URL. Okay, so now we have our code base, simple, not big deal, and we're returning it. So let's go ahead and try and see what we get. So now we say new URL to generate short URL. So I'm just changing to short. Let's say hello. Okay, go to the URL and pass this in. Let's see what we get here. So now this is our response. What we passed in was shortened to this. Let's pass in something new. Let's say volunteer sign up. So you see that's 01, right? So we run this and we get our new URL. Volunteer sign up, this was shortened into this, a new short URL. So this is pretty straightforward. I mean, if you're enjoying this session right now, go ahead and let me know in the chat. If you have any questions, drop it in the chat as well. So I will know if this pattern is something you prefer, for learning instead of showing you some tons of detail on the terminal. So probably we can proceed like this. But we'll definitely have to do some things on our local machine as well, so that you definitely know how to work with your own computer when implementing stuff like this. So this is straightforward. We covered a little bit of programming. We understood some things about the npm package, which is the load package manager. Also, we covered a couple of things. We tested it. We wrote some code. We also write a simple code to generate URL using a simple library, a random string. We answered a couple of questions. We discussed about the file system. We also discussed about our process. Also the What's the other word for it? File system and arguments, right? In the previous class, I showed you how to get arguments to process the tax, right? So we also did that in the previous class. I just want to make sure that we all understood what we are supposed to cover from our curriculum, and that is it basically. And this should be all. If you have any questions, drop a question in the chat. But if there are no questions, then that should be all for tonight. And I hope you enjoyed the session. Have a wonderful night.